Welcome back to the PFF NFL show here for a quarterback showcase episode of the program. Trevor, Sikkema, and Seth Galina in person here for this show. So hopefully, the chemistry is up, the audio quality is up.
Whoa. You're hating on my home setup audio quality?
No. Now it's good. It's good now. We've upgraded you. You got the Shure mic all set up and everything. You're good to go. But I'm excited to have you here in studio. We've got the bar set up here, and those of you who have been watching the channel, going back to the It's Just Football days, a little throwback here with this setup. So really excited to be back in these chairs specifically.
Is this not an episode of It's Just Football? Sorry, because I'm only contractually obligated to do It's Just Football episodes.
Okay, so. Then I think you're working for free, actually, for this one. So that's actually tough for you.
It'll be the first time.
I think you got to negotiate a little bit better there. No, we're here to talk about some quarterbacks. We're going to talk about Bryce Young. He's back, baby. The resurgence, MVP level play from him this past week.
Hall of Fame level, MVP level, can play literally any sport in any era of the history of sports.
True.
You can throw Bryce Young in there. Stanley Cup Finals, MVP, Conn Smythe.
That's as a goalie. As a goalie,
Finals.
Yes, right. As
World
a center.
Series MVP.
As a center, yeah.
As a shortstop.
We're obviously going to talk about, wow, come on, short, you had to throw that in there. All right, we're going to talk about Bryce Young, obviously, in all seriousness, a great day, his best day that we saw against New Orleans Saints coming back after being benched. We're going to talk about CJ Stroud as well, because not a good performance for him with the New York Jets, but is it his fault? Okay, so, I think with both those guys, with Bryce Young and with CJ Stroud, what can we really expect moving forward? Are those indicators of what we are going to see for the second half of the season? And then we do have to talk about Joe Burrow, because it, again, in all seriousness, feels like he is playing at an MVP level. And maybe the Bengals record doesn't show it, but I think the play has been fantastic, from my point of view at least. Maybe Seth disagrees. If you don't have a PFF subscription, you can get one right now and check out all of the premium stats that we're going to talk about here on this show as we analyze the quarterback position. Just go to pff.com or subscribe.pff.com. to get yourself a subscription to see all these data points that we're talking about here. So, all right, let's talk about Bryce Young first. I think that's where we should start. A lot of people have a lot of things invested into this pick, myself included, with him as my number one overall player from the 2023 NFL Draft, former Heisman Trophy winner, just an unbelievable player during his time while he was at Alabama, and it really just did not look good through the first year and 2 games that he is into his NFL career. So against New Orleans Saints, the Panthers at home get the big win 23-22. Bryce Young on the day, 16 for 26 passing with 171 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And then he had a 75.2 passing grade on the day. The adjusted completion percentage was a little bit lower. I think we'll get into that at 68.0%. You kind of want that to be a little bit higher. But 2 big time throws, 1 turnover-worthy play here in this game. Seth, I will start with your opinions. Just what did you think from Bryce Young carving up your New Orleans Saints?
So I'm going to make a very weird comparison, and I'm going to talk about him and Anthony Richardson.
Okay.
So 2 completely different quarterbacks, right? In terms of play style, in terms of their size, obviously. But I think what people have been saying about Anthony Richardson, just get him reps, get him playing time, because you knew that it was going to take a long time for him to figure out NFL offenses and how to operate an NFL offense. But you could just get away with it to a certain degree because of how big and fast he was. I think with Bryce, there's a similarity there because he's so small, it was always going to take a while for him to learn an NFL offense and execute it at a super high level. But everything we heard about him at Alabama, I've heard Bill O'Brien talk about it, and he's obviously been around some great quarterbacks, including Tom Brady, and he's saying hey, Bryce Young is one of the smartest quarterbacks I've been around. It just gets the game. But the problem is when you don't have tremendous traits. And Bryce Young does not have tremendous traits. He has negative traits.
Physical traits.
Yeah, physical traits. Right. He has negative physical traits for the position. Going in and saying, "Oh, just be the smartest player on the field as a rookie and a second-year player," is just not possible.
Right.
And have an offense coordinator change after your first offseason, and a full coaching staff change after your full offseason. It's just never going to happen, even for a guy as smart as him. So it was always going to take time. It was always going to take a lot of reps to get to that level. He was never going to become just a high-level master of any NFL offense this early in his career, just like no quarterback is this early in their career. Mm-hmm. And so you saw the issues where, well, he's not a master of the offense, and then he doesn't have the traits to get out of trouble like some other quarterbacks have that have been picked recently.
Right.
And that's kind of where we are. So like he's had like good games once in a while last season. I thought it's been a pretty good last 2 games, even against a very good Broncos defense 2 weeks ago, and a kind of mid to below average Saints defense. It's been good, but I think you have to give him reps, and I think that's the only. Like, what else can you do really?
Sure.
If the whole idea was he's super smart, then you have to keep giving him reps, and you have to stay with the same offense in the offseason and do all that stuff, or else we're never going to get to the point where it makes sense for Bryce Young.
Yeah, I sort of used that as a defense point for Bryce Young last year when he was really struggling. Now, the offensive line is playing a lot better this year than they were last year. And so I think that that's a little bit different. But when you looked at sort of his 2023 season, his rookie season, the offensive line was not good. The pass catchers were not good. The run game was not good. Like, nothing really was there.
And schematically, it was not good either. Like,
also there were probably so many people in his ear, right? Tepper, Reich, the offensive coordinator, his quarterback's coach, his parent. Like, it was a whirlwind of a year for him. And I remember saying this last year. Bryce does not have the physical tools to overcome that big of a negative environment. For him, I agree with you completely. It was always going to be a mental edge for Bryce Young. Now, I was worried because when we started this year, he still looked mentally broken. Like, I went back and I watched the Saints game. As much as I watched the Saints game from this past week, I was like, okay, what was the big difference? And to be honest with you, it's not like he's physically changed. It's not like he did a bunch of steroids in the last 7 weeks and he's just absolutely jacked now, and physically he's like, yeah, exactly what you would want for the position or something. He is still physically the same quarterback, but specifically against the Saints this time around, I don't know if because the benching sort of gave him this mentality of like, well, what have I got to lose? Like, they already say my time is done in Carolina. Last year I had all the pressure in the world on me as the franchise quarterback and all that kinds of stuff. And I don't know if he's just playing more free, playing more loose, but this was always the perplexing part about Bryce last year and even at the start of this year. He just missed. Like, he was just missing throws. Like even the opportunities where you go, okay, that's a touch pass that Bryce Young should hit. He just missed. He was just completely missing. He had so much fear over tight coverage and single coverage and timing and all that kinds of stuff. Against the Saints this past week, I didn't really see, I don't want to say that I saw none of it, but I saw much less of it, especially when you look at his passing grade against single coverage alone. It was an 86.1. That's the highest of his entire career. So he was so much more fearless and willing to layer the football, put touch under passes, and it was great. And it felt like he was playing with so much more confidence. Now, let's be honest. It's the Saints, all due respect. They're bad. They fired Dennis Allen after this game. Like, they have been on a downward spiral since starting the season 2-0. This is not a great football team in New Orleans that they beat. But still, the progress was there. Now they host the New York Giants at home. Another opportunity for Bryce to look good before then they have the bye week, and then the schedule gets a little bit rough down the stretch. But to me, for Bryce Young, these 2 weeks against New Orleans and now hosting the New York Giants.
They're not, sorry, not to cut you off, they're not hosting the New York Giants. They are the city of Munich.
Oh,
Germany
you're right. You are right.
You're hosting both teams.
So that is an interesting,
that's interesting
wrinkle here, playing this game in Germany. Thank you for correcting me there. So that's an interesting wrinkle, but it is still the Giants. It is still a beatable football team. If he can look good in back-to-back weeks, that at least makes me feel good about, okay, maybe mentally he has less voices in his head. It's less foggy. It is more clear. He can be more confident because that's what we saw at Alabama with him.
I think the important thing to note about this game being in Germany is myself, yourself, and everyone watching this podcast or this YouTube clip is going to be watching the Carolina Panthers versus the New York Giants Sunday morning because we're all sick bastards.
Of course.
That's the important note.
Correct.
There.
Yes.
This game being in Germany in the morning. And
so you're saying that all eyes being on him. It's not a 1 p.m. game where nobody really cares about two bad football teams. The world's watching.
And it's going to be interesting to see if he can do it another week, right? Because like I said, like the grades weren't great against Denver 2 weeks ago, but I thought he executed the offense pretty well. He executed the offense better against the Saints. So it's like, can we get better each week against the one concern I have is always going to be like the play under pressure with him. So I looked this up, and he's since 2023 started, so since last season started, he's top 10 in the amount of dropbacks where he had to or decided to move off his end of his dropback. And his grade on those plays is poor, extremely poor. And the problem is those guys, so first of all, that's a lot of times to do it, considering he missed most of this season already and some games last season. So you're talking about being in the same volume of plays as like a Josh Allen who's played every snap and Lamar Jackson and all that stuff. So that alone is a problem. We have to get him to stop, whether that's the O-line, the receiving play, and the scheme and all that stuff. We got to get him to be able to throw in rhythm a lot more. Mm-hmm. That's basically what I'm saying. Because the stuff under pressure is always going to be a problem for him because of the size. Like when you see him throw these checkdowns and he's got to get up in his tippy toes and he misses a check down because he doesn't have the abilities to like be. One of the things about playing quarterback is as you get through your progressions and you get to the third, the fourth, the check down, etc., your body positioning, your body angles are messed up at this point. Because you've moved around in the pocket, you've done all this stuff, you've moved around, and so what happens is you got to be able to have this kind of natural ability to get the ball out, even though there's bodies around you and stuff like that. And Bryce Young he might never have that ability, which is a bit kind of a big problem.
Yeah.
So he needs to be able to, and I go back to the same thing, and we're going to talk about with Burrow too, is like he needs to be able to master the offense so he does not put himself under pressure, and he can see, okay, where do I need to go with the football? How can I see this defense pre-snap, change the play, change the protection to get into a situation where I'm not going to get under pressure or I have a lower chance of getting into pressure. And again, that only comes from playing. Right. And being in the same offense, like not firing Dave Canales. Like whatever you want to say about Dave Canales, like if you don't fire him, you can get more in depth this offseason with the offense with Bryce Young, and you can get him into these scenarios that I'm talking about. So that to me is going to be the biggest thing, is can he stay out of pressure? And the way for Bryce Young to do that is to have a mastery of the offense.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You and I were actually talking about this yesterday when it comes to quarterbacks in college football, going from college to the NFL, ones that understand or make protection calls to the line of scrimmage versus ones that don't, right? Yeah, I think that, quarterback coaches or people who have coached the game will tell you, like, well, what's the first place you look when you're a quarterback when you break the huddle? I'm looking at the safeties first, all right? What's going on with the safeties? Is it open? Is it closed? We got two guys back there. We got one. But a lot of the quarterbacks who make the protection calls at the line of scrimmage at least have the freedom to maybe change things at the line of scrimmage. They're looking at the front first, and they're saying, like, okay, where's the front? Okay, let me make a protection cut check, and then we're looking, okay, now you can look at the coverage, now I can look at the safeties, things like that. And so for Bryce Young, I think that's a really great point that you made there, is not just his overall ability, but it's sort of advancing the conversation of like, okay, he's small. Right? Like, stop telling me he's small. I think that that's probably where Dave Canales was when they benched Bryce Young. Is
that's what he said when they benched him.
What, he's small?
He brought him into the office. He said, "Bryce, you're small."
Yeah.
We're going with Andy Dalton.
And it just shattered Bryce because he had never heard that before. No, but I think that when you make a decision like this to bench a number one overall pick at a franchise quarterback, a lot of people are in on this decision, right? It's the general manager, it's the owner, right? There's a lot of
people that shouldn't be in on this decision are in on this decision.
And it's true, but I that's sort of a different conversation. But basically, with Bryce out, the conversation then becomes like, okay, I know why you benched him. You have explained to us why you benched him. What are we doing from this point on? And I think what you are saying is, I think it's a healthy conclusion to come to say the way that he gets better, the way that he becomes the player that we drafted him number one overall to be, is that mastery of the offense, is playing football and being able to, the second that we clap our hands and we get up to the line of scrimmage, Bryce can not only identify the coverages, identify and know what the coverages are at the speed of the NFL game, but also see like, okay, this player's coming here, this player's coming here. I think that's a sim pressure. I think that one's real. This is where we need to shift the offensive line. And even if you're outmanned, or even if you have a hat on a hat and there might be some pressure somewhere, you know where to go with the football. So it is less of those panicked, total off-platform throws that are not his strength.
No, he just that's always, again, that's just never going to be his strength. He's just not a big enough player to be under pressure and then throw a 75-yard pass like Justin Herbert or something like that, right?
So that's what I think about Bryce Young. I don't know if you have any more Bryce Young thoughts kind of from this game or anything, but I'm just really excited for this next game that they have against the Giants because it is winnable. And now we get to see, can he stack these up? Then we get the bye week. Then maybe we can figure it out a little bit more. The schedule gets tough down the stretch. I'm not saying that Carolina is going to be a team that's going to be a sneaky playoff team or anything like that. But if you are Carolina...
I hope you're not saying that.
No, I'm not. But if you are Carolina, you're now sitting in a spot where your offensive line's a lot better than what it was last year. The run game's a lot better than it was last year. And you don't even have Jonathan Brooks yet. Okay, you're sitting here trading wide receivers. You're trading Deontay Johnson. You're trading Jonathan Mingo.
That's a problem.
Like Adam Thielen was on the trade block. I don't know if he's going to be on this team next year. You basically have 0 wide receivers this year. But you were in a situation where certainly if this team picks in the top 8, and if you think that Bryce Young can be your guy, Tetro McMillan from Arizona, Luther Burden III from Missouri, Travis Hunter obviously from Colorado, like now you're talking about adding a surefire number one, or at least what we would think would be a number one wide receiver at the NFL level. And I think that at least gives you a building block moving forward with the Carolina Panthers. So that's my thoughts. Any closing thoughts on Bryce?
Yeah, like I said, I thought he executed the offense really well and the accuracy was a lot better. And again, if he plays in rhythm, you can get good play out of him. Right?
Yeah.
And like the Saints are not a great team in terms of pressuring the quarterback anymore. So this was a great game for him to say, hey, like I can like breathe a little bit in the pocket and make some plays.
I think everybody is like ready to bury the Cincinnati Bengals, and we just plain cannot do that. I understand that the season did not get off on the right foot, starting 0-3, starting 1-4, honestly. But they're in a situation now where they're 4-5. They are still in the playoff hunt. They still hold their own destiny. And on top of all of that, the most important position is playing unbelievably well because Joe Burrow is absolutely on fire. And to me, he's playing at an MVP caliber level. So when you look at Burrow and what he was able to do this past week against the Las Vegas Raiders, he was 27 for 39, 251 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and 1 interception. So, the PFF stats are a little bit less glowing than that. He had 2 big-time throws as opposed to the 5 touchdown passes that everybody likes to talk about. But he had 0 turnover-worthy plays in this one. And right now, he is fantastic at knowing where to go with the football. And you referenced this, so hopefully I'm not sort of stealing your thunder, but you talked about this a couple of minutes ago. Mastery of the offense. You said we would talk about that when we talked about Joe Burrow, and that just feels like what it's like. No Jermaine Burton, no T. Higgins in this game. And what have we talked about before? Oh, if they don't have Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, like it's a completely different offense and the Bengals can lose. Well, offense looks pretty damn good without T. Higgins, and then you could throw Jermaine Burton in there if you would want to, because he's somebody that I know a lot of Bengals fans wanted to step up at some point this season, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Your thoughts on Joe Burrow, kind of where we are with them sitting at 4-5 now?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying, like early in the season without T. Higgins, they were one of the worst passing offenses in the league. And now...
Was it just too focused? Was it just too siloed to Jamar?
I think that's part of it. I think not, he's just starting to understand Gesicki and all those other guys. Mm-hmm. But yeah, first of all, T. Higgins is really good. Like, let's not act like
right,
T. Higgins is a top 15 receiver, top 10 receiver, whatever. So, like, he's really good. And then they lose they get T. Higgins back. The offense goes crazy. They're scoring a bunch of points. They're throwing the ball around. And then they lose him. And then we thought, okay, well, they lose. Like, after that, two very small sample sizes of with T. Higgins, without T. Higgins, they lose him again. You're like, okay, well, what's going to happen now? And like you said, they've been awesome. You know what I mean? Like, they've been great the past couple of weeks without T. Higgins again. So, mastery of the offense. I have a take here, which is
We love that. We love takes.
A little
we
half-brained, but we're going to say it anyways. So I think the thing with Zach Taylor and this offense, we've talked about this. We've been negative about Zach Taylor in a lot of ways because you use the word siloed. Like sometimes this offense feels siloed. Like there's not a lot of cohesive parts. Whereas you look at a Kyle Shanahan offense or those type of offenses, and everything kind of works together, right? But so you're like, oh, they should fire Zach Taylor. And I probably said that. I was like, they should fire Zach Taylor and bring in some other guy. And I know Zach Taylor worked with like Sean McVay, but it's a very different offense. So like, oh, bring in one of these guys and then everything's going to be perfect. However, just the fact that Joe Burrow and now even, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase have worked together in this offense for 4 years now or whatever it's been. Mm-hmm. That gives you the mastery of the offense. So like this offense it's still an NFL offense. Like at the end of the day, like it's still a very complicated NFL offense. Again, would I like to see more stuff married together in certain ways? Yeah, sure. But if you have this mastery of the offense, you can, again, we same thing we talked about with Bryce. You can master the protection. You can change the routes. There's a play where they're coming out on 1st and 10. So first play of the drive. So they got the call in from the sideline. They said, hey, we're going to run this. They go out there. And Burrow sees something. He sees too high safety. He sees that they're probably not going to spin down from too high to one high playing the Eagles a couple weeks ago. And he changes the play. Like they're in trips to one side. He ends up moving one of the receivers over, so now they're in two receivers to each side. He moves Jamar Chase from the outside receiver to inside receiver, so Jamar Chase can run the 10-yard out route or the 12-yard out route, which is the route that they want versus what he thinks the coverage is going to be. And Jamar Chase ends up slipping, so they don't get it. But he gets open, he just slips and falls, and so they can't get the completion. But like that is mastery of the offense, right? And so like by keeping him and Zach Taylor together. Like Zach Taylor knows football. Like I guarantee you, Zach Taylor knows football.
Right.
That I know.
No, yeah. Sure. Like we critique like what could be, and it's always disappointing if you don't hit a ceiling with a quarterback like Joe Burrow. So we critique it, but like what you're saying, like the floor is still NFL worthy, and it is funny because the talk about Joe Burrow when he was coming out of LSU, it was easier because he was this massive record breaker at LSU. So you didn't really have to listen to a lot of the negatives with him because there was never any debate that he was going to be the number one overall pick in the draft. But there was some of that same conversation with Joe Burrow that we are talking about with Bryce Young, right? When you compare Joe Burrow, and even there's still conversations when we talk about, okay, who are the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL? Yeah, a lot of people will get to Mahomes and Allen, and even they'll throw Herbert in there because the arm talent means more, right? Joe Burrow doesn't have as much arm talent. He's not this crazy athlete. He's not this guy who's going to make these nuts off-platform throws because he's physically more gifted than like 99% of these other pros. You could throw Lamar Jackson obviously in there as well. So Burrow, when it comes to those conversations, you have a little bit of that, not to the extent that it was for Bryce Young, because Bryce is a true outlier basically in every way with the physical profiles for playing in the league. But the thought with Burrow was that when it doesn't go right, does he physically have the ability to get you out of trouble in his escapability and what he can do as an off-platform thrower? And a lot of people doubted those things. And there are some people that still, wouldn't take Burrow because of those situations. But Burrow in his current state is basically what you want Bryce Young to become, right? That continuity with the offense, having true mastery, knowing where to go with the football, how to keep yourself protected, knowing what your hot routes are, being able to change those things in the pre-snap before the ball is snapped. Like what we're seeing from Burrow right now is essentially the ceiling of what Bryce Young would be. Like that is the prototype. Like that is where we would need to go along the line. So I think Burrow obviously is more physically gifted than Bryce is, but to your point, I think that kind of marries these two conversations that we've had of like, this is what it looks like. And you don't want to talk about like why Burrow is playing at an MVP level. You watch that game against the Raiders, he looks in control the entire time. And I know we talk about like, the confidence and like Cool Joe and all that, obviously since the last year that he was at LSU, but that is really who he is. And really since that first year that he played with the Bengals, he has had total mastery of this offense ever since. And against an inferior opponent like they were playing against the Raiders, even without T. Higgins, he can just make it look easy because he knows exactly where guys need to be.
And I think you get to a point here where it becomes, we're going to stop saying it's the Zach Taylor offense, and we're going to start saying it's the Joe Burrow offense with Zach Taylor. It's the Drew Brees offense with Sean Payton. It's the Tom Brady offense with Josh McDaniels. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to get to that point where, I don't know if we're going to get there ever with like a Brock Purdy or a Tua, right? Like, that's always going to be the Mike McDaniel offense. That's always going to be the Kyle Shanahan offense, right? So again, being together, having that cohesiveness for like 4 straight off seasons or 5 straight off seasons, whatever it is, that gets you to a point. And then obviously there's a lot of processing talent. Right?
Sure,
accuracy,
right.
Processing talent.
Yes.
He's always had that. He's always been high level in that way. The offensive line has played pretty good the last couple of weeks. Like, it didn't feel like, besides that one play where Max Crosby tattooed him when he went offside, like it didn't feel like.
I don't even know if he was offsides. Actually, I went back and I watched like frame for frame. It's close. He just times it incredibly well, and that also was a dumb penalty. I think that's Crosby's literally sacking him like this. He just puts his chest straight into Burrow's shoulder, and it was just because he timed the snap so well and got it such a clean hit on Burrow that the ref did not even think about it. You watch that play back, you can see the ref. It's just like no debate. Like, I don't care that Crosby didn't lower his head, anything like that. It was kind of a funny play to watch.
And yeah, so just to say, like, that was the only one where I was like, rewatching it, I was like, oh, Max Crosby like was part of this game, and that's saying something. Max Crosby is a wrecker on pretty much every play generally.
Yeah.
And then I'll just add about the Bengals offense that doesn't need to be said, but Jamar Chase is
not bad.
He's okay.
He's fine.
He's pretty good.
He's not bad.
He's ridiculous.
When he's in the lineup, he's not bad. He's a pretty good quarterback. I do want to touch on CJ Stroud's day because it was a struggle against the New York Jets. Now, how much was a struggle on his side of things versus the circumstances? And if it is the circumstances, are the circumstances going to get better? But before we get into that, best part about football season, it's always checking the post-game stats, right? Which wide receiver scored more than 2 touchdowns? Which quarterbacks threw for more or less than 300 yards? If you think you know what's going to happen before kickoff, you got to play Pick 6 by DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Select between 2 to 6 players. Choose whether they will have more or less than a single stat. That's it. It is that simple. For first-time Pick 6 players, you can check this out. New customers, $5 on your first Pick 6 set. You get $50 in Pick 6 credits. It's easy. We're sitting here talking about quarterbacks. If you are a believer in Bryce Young and you're like, man, Bryce is going to light the world on fire in Germany, and he's absolutely going to light up the Giants defense. Go check out whatever his numbers are, whatever the passing numbers are, whether it's touchdowns or total yards or whatever it is. You can pick him. If you think Burrow is going to still be on a roll, you could pair those guys. There's your 2 players. Boom. Very simple. Put $5 on the line. You get 50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Use the promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF for those new customers to play $5 on the first set. Get 50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. So it was not the best day at the office for CJ Stroud. Now, understandably, no Nico Collins and now no Stephon Diggs here in this game. But I think the issues with what happened here in the 21-13 loss against the Jets goes even deeper than just not having those receivers available. So Stroud in this game only completed 11 passes for 11 of his 30 attempts for 191 passing yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions either, a 48.5 PFF grade. But when you dig into it a little bit deeper, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 4 big-time throws in this game, and 1 turnover-worthy play. So that means of the 11 completions that he had, 4 of them were big-time throws. Well, I guess that's not true. It doesn't necessarily have to be 11 because sometimes a big-time throw could be an incompletion. But to have 4 big-time throws, given the amount of times that he was thrown and honestly the amount of times that he was under pressure, I thought was really telling of how he can make the best of bad situations. But Seth, is he the one that's putting the team in the bad situations? Is it out of his control? Is it something that can change? What do we think here? Because the Texans are a team that not only has division title hopes, but deep playoff run hopes, maybe even a Super Bowl. And it did not look pretty against the Jets on Thursday, a team that a lot of people thought that maybe they should have beaten.
Yeah, I think so there's like a bunch of issues here with this team. And it is generally a good Jets defense. They haven't played particularly amazing this season, but historically it's been a good defense. Yeah, they got a lot of talent. And then when you take away Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell becomes your number one receiver, which is probably not a good receiver, but not a wide receiver one.
Right.
Like you're obviously going to have issues that way. I just think I like the Stroud on that on Thursday night, and I was like, oh, he doesn't trust anything, because there's stuff available I think for him to throw. I thought Bobby Slowick still did a pretty good job, to be honest, but he doesn't really trust anything early in the play, and then you have an issue with this Houston Texans offensive line. If you don't trust something early in the play that's open, it's over for you. Right. There's no getting to your second read when your guards are getting massacred. And pressure is a bucket. Like the term under pressure, the term getting a pressure, being pressured, it's a bucket that is a lot of different types of pressure, let's call it. Mm-hmm. There's a hurry. There's a pressure that's not a hurry. There's a pressure that is a hurry, and the pressure that is a hit that's not a hit, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
These pressures that were happening by the Jets defense, especially on the interior, those were pressures with a hurry and a hit. Like they were in his face right away. Those were clean wins by the defensive line, especially Quinnen Williams, who had a great game. So like you got to be able to throw very early to your first read, which is something that this offense has tended to be able to do. Now, you're going to get Nico Collins back this week in a huge game against the Detroit Lions on Sunday Night Football on NBC.
On NBC, yes, thank you. Yeah, good plug. So
like that becomes such an important factor. Like if there's anyone he trusts, it's Nico Collins.
Right.
So like if we can get that factor back and we don't have to go to our second and third reads and checkdowns, like we're going to be able to move the ball a lot better than we did against the Jets.
Stroud's average time to throw this season, 3.01. It's 11th highest in the NFL. So above 3 seconds. Obviously, that's a higher mark. And I think that when I was watching the game against the Jets, and then when I went back and I watched the all-22 of it, something that CJ is very comfortable with that I've really grown to love about his game, certainly since that very last game against Georgia he played at Ohio State, and then that first year that he played, he will step up in the pocket, right? There's a lot of times when I'm evaluating quarterbacks and I'm scouting quarterbacks, and a lot of these, not to sound too boomer about it, but like a lot of these younger quarterbacks don't want to step up in the pocket. They play, 7-on-7 flag football. They play in just these opening events where there's no contact and there's no real offensive line play or anything like that. And they just get very used to bailing deeper in the pocket and rolling left or right. And that is just what they do. Now, in a real game against real competition, certainly at the NFL level, that gets you in big trouble. And it's a tendency that you need to break, especially when defenses know that you are not somebody who's going to step up in the middle of the pocket. They will adjust how they rush you. They will sell out for those outside shoulders. They will not be afraid that you're going to step up in the pocket if they overcommit to the speed rushes on both sides of the trenches. So, when you don't have the ability to step up in the pocket under pressure, it is such a handcuff to what you can do. With offensive line scheme, with what you were doing with your receivers, because if you cannot step up in the middle of a pocket and extend the play even half of a second because you stepped up in the middle, well, then you're somebody who's going to bail left or bail right. All of a sudden, if the situation presents itself where you don't feel comfortable stepping up and you got to bail out to the right, well, what if none of the concepts were to the right? Then all of a sudden you're kind of screwing yourself over. You got more defenders coming this way. They're crashing in on you, and you got one wide receiver that you can look at on that side of the field. So it's just paramount that you have the ability to step up in the pocket. CJ Stroud does it. He does that now pretty well. Now, the issue is the interior offensive line. Is bad.
It's all right in front of us.
It's bad, and specifically this past game where Kenyon Green, who is not playing well this season, he's one of the lowest graded guards that we have throughout the season. Now he goes out with injury. Kendrick Green comes in, but he doesn't really play that much better. So with Stroud, I saw opportunities where his body language tells you he wants to step up. And the interior offensive line is giving up so many of those critical pressures that you were talking about where he doesn't even have the ability to do that. So this is going to be a major issue for this team until they can fix it. And it's kind of sounded like an obvious there. Like, it's going to be an issue that's going to hold the team back until they can fix this little thing. And a lot of things get better once they do that. That's probably a better way to phrase what I was trying to say there. Because Stroud's got the mental ability to do it. He's got the courage to do it. He'll step up in the pocket. He's not afraid to do so. But to me, you were watching him bail out of the pocket to the left and right a lot more. And he's graded fine when that's happened. It's not like he's a bad quarterback when that happens. But I was specifically watching passes where the zip on his passes was like dying more than I was used to seeing with CJ Stroud. And it's because he's used to being able to step into throws. Because he wants to, because he knows that it's important, because he knows he can. And you just didn't see him have that opportunity to step in as many throws against the New York Jets. And I'm worried if that's going to be a constant throughout the second half of this season, even with Nico Collins back, it might not be the potent Texans offense that they want it to be to make that deep playoff run.
I think what you'll see more of with Nico Collins back is these like quick throws over the middle of the field. If you guys listening want to go back and watch the first touchdown against the Bears, week 2 on Sunday Night Football on NBC.
On NBC. Good play. Good play.
You can see that like very quick hitting, get to the end of your drop back. Nico Collins is running like an 8-yard in-breaking slant, glance, speed dig, whatever you want to call it. The linebacker jumps the running back who's running into the flat. He throws it there. They get catch and a lot of yak. And like you haven't seen that without Nico Collins, and that's such a big part of that offense. Mm-hmm. So like getting that helps, and that helps pressure, right? If you can get the ball out quickly, you can deal with pressure in that way. So I'm excited to see this offense. I've always loved this offense. I'm excited to see it healthy again with Nico Collins, and I think that I last year before Tank Dell got injured, like we were looking at like a very potent 1-2 combination with Nico Collins and Tank Dell.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Stephon Diggs, an important player there, but you're kind of okay with those two players as your 1 and 2.
As long as you get Nico back.
Yeah, that's important. This whole thing.
But even with that being the case, they've got to be better up front. Like they just
the main thing is the amount. So like yes, like when a guy gets pressured, it's going to be bad. When a guy gets quick pressure, it's going to be even worse than that. But if you can get the ball off quickly, you go from dealing with 14 pressures in a game to 7 pressures in a game. Mm-hmm. So yes, those 7 pressures are going to be bad because it's tough to deal with pressure. Mm-hmm. But going from 14 to 7 cutting in half. Right. Just the amount of time, the volume of times gives you a chance to succeed a lot better.
Yeah. So Stroud, again, I think to sort of encapsulate the question that we had entering this segment of the show, I'm not worried about Stroud, especially with Nico Collins coming back. I'm not worried about CJ Stroud, but I am worried about his time to throw being higher and the fact that the interior offensive line is giving up pressures the way that they are. That is something that when you play the better teams, you might be able to still get into the playoffs, win the division, all that. But when you talk about the playoffs starting, this team has enough talent to win a couple of games in the playoffs. They really do. But not if the interior offensive line is not going to get better this season. We will see. If it does, I don't trade deadline, everything like that. But I mean, like nobody's trading for good offensive linemen. I mean, nobody's getting nobody's getting rid of their good offensive linemen. So it's basically the guys that they have on the team, they've got to work with. They've got to play better. Appreciate everybody watching and listening. If you want to get these stats for yourself, you can get one over at pff.com or subscribe.pff.com. Get yourself that PFF Plus subscription. You can see everything that we were talking about here and all the other shows that we're doing. Seth, appreciate you joining me. This was a lot of fun to get to do this in person. I hope we get to do some more in-person shows throughout the season, but appreciate everybody watching and listening to the show. For Seth, Galina, I'm Trevor Sikkema. This has been another edition of the Quarterback Showcase here on the PFF NFL Show. We will see you guys same time next week. See you then.